There are invisible lines that separate right from wrong, legal from illegal, moral from immoral. Most people go through their entire lives without ever having to face these boundaries up close. But what happens when circumstances push someone to that limit? When necessity obscures the clarity of these lines? I'm about to tell you about an ordinary man who, in a single day, saw his entire life balance on this abyss. This isn't a story invented to entertain. It's an account of how the choices we make under pressure can transform us into people we barely recognize. You might think you would never be in this position, that your decisions would be different. Perhaps. But before judging, put yourself in the worn shoes of Marcelo Souza on that Thursday that began like any other and ended like no other in his life. The alarm went off at 5:30 a.m., as always. Marcelo opened his eyes in the still, dark room, feeling the familiar weight of insomnia that had accompanied him for months. Beside him, Helena slept, oblivious to the worries that kept him awake night after night. He got up carefully so as not to wake her and walked to the bathroom, avoiding the floorboards that creaked. In the mirror, he faced a 43-year-old man who looked 53. Deep, dark circles, grey hair at the temples, worry lines etched into his forehead. An administrative manager at a chain of gas stations for 15 years, Marcelo never imagined he would reach this point. 3 months of late rent, car financing about to be foreclosed. His 12-year-old daughter Sophia's treatment interrupted because the health insurance had been cancelled due to non-payment. The warm water from the shower ran down his body, but couldn't wash away the feeling of failure that suffocated him. While preparing weak coffee, the last package already running out, Marcelo mentally reviewed the conversation he had with Rogerio Mendez the day before. Rogerio, owner of the gas station chain where he worked, had been direct. "I need someone trustworthy for a special service. Something discreet, beyond your normal duties. In exchange, I can solve your financial problems. All of them." The proposal hung in the air like a seductive and poisonous perfume. Marcelo knew exactly what it meant. In recent months, he had noticed discrepancies in accounting records, strange movements, money that appeared and disappeared without clear explanation. He wasn't stupid. He knew the gas station chain served as a laundry for money of dubious origin. And now Rogerio wanted to bring him into the scheme. The bitter coffee went down, burning his throat, just as anticipatory guilt burned his conscience. The clock showed 6:15 a.m. He had until the end of the day to give an answer. Helena entered the kitchen as he was finishing adjusting his tie. Even after 18 years of marriage, the sight of her still calmed his heart. Brown hair tied in a messy bun, gentle eyes that had cried too much in recent weeks. "Did you sleep?" she asked, pouring herself coffee. Marcelo shook his head negatively. "It will get better," she said, touching his arm with a confidence he didn't share. Sophia asked when she could go back to physical therapy. The phrase hung between them like a silent accusation. Their daughter had suffered a bicycle accident 6 months ago, resulting in a spinal injury that required continuous treatment. Treatment they could no longer afford. "I'll figure it out," Marcelo replied, avoiding her eyes. "I have some possibilities coming up at work." Helena stared at him, an unasked question in her gaze. She knew him too well. "What kind of possibilities?" she questioned. Marcelo kissed her forehead and picked up his briefcase. "We'll talk later. I'm going to be late." And he left quickly, fleeing from the question and from himself. The central administration office of Agia Gas Stations was on the 10th floor of a commercial building downtown. When Marcelo arrived at 7:30 a.m., Rogerio's secretary was already waiting for him. "Mr. Mendez asked you to go directly to his office as soon as you arrived," she informed, with a rehearsed smile. Marcelo's stomach contracted. He had expected to have the whole day to think, to find some miraculous alternative that didn't involve compromising his integrity. But time, like money, always seemed scarce in his life lately. He knocked lightly on the dark wooden door and entered after hearing a deep, confident come in. Rogerio Mendez, a man in his early 50s, athletic physique maintained through expensive gyms and an aura of power that naturally emanated from him, was standing by the panoramic window. Marcelo, punctual as always, he said, indicating the chair in front of his desk. Coffee? Water? Marcelo declined with a gesture. He wanted to get this over with, whatever the outcome. So, have you thought about my proposal? Rogerio asked, sitting down and reclining in his leather chair. Marcelo felt his throat dry. I need to understand exactly what you expect from me, he replied, trying to buy time. Rogerio smiled, a smile that didn't reach his eyes. Always cautious, aren't you? That's why you're perfect for this. He opened a drawer and took out a brown envelope, which he slid across the desk toward Marcelo. In here is 20,000 in cash, an advance, and detailed instructions on how to proceed with certain transactions that will pass through you from now on. Marcelo looked at the envelope as if it were a snake ready to strike. This is money laundering, he said, almost in a whisper. It wasn't a question. Rogerio didn't flinch. This is business, Marcelo. Money that comes in, money that goes out. You just need to ensure the records are adequate. Nothing that doesn't already pass through your department, just with some creative adjustments. He paused, observing the hesitation on Marcelo's face. Think about your daughter, her treatment, the bills you can't pay. The words hit Marcelo like a punch to the stomach. Sophia, his daughter who dreamed of dancing ballet again, who asked when she could return to physical therapy, who smiled bravely even when the pain was almost unbearable. The brown envelope seemed to pulse on the desk as if it had a life of its own. 20,000 would solve the immediate problems, the late rent, the car, resuming Sophia's treatment. But at what cost? And if I refuse? He asked, his voice firmer than he felt. Rogerio's smile disappeared. It would be a shame. I'd have to find someone less qualified, someone who might make mistakes. And mistakes in this type of operation are dangerous, understand? The veiled threat hung in the air. Besides, the company is going through a restructuring. Cuts will be necessary. Long-time employees with higher salaries would be the first on the list. Marcelo felt a chill down his spine. It wasn't just a proposal. It was a crossroads. Accept and compromise his integrity, or refuse and lose everything. He left Rogerio's office with the envelope in the inside pocket of his jacket, weighing like lead against his chest. He hadn't given a definitive answer, had asked for a few hours to review the instructions. Rogerio had granted it, with the confidence of someone who knows they've already won. In the bathroom, Marcelo splashed cold water on his face and faced his reflection in the mirror. Who was this man who was seriously considering joining a criminal scheme? Who justified the possibility with the need to care for his family? He had always considered himself upright, honest, but is honesty a luxury that only the financially stable can afford? His cell phone vibrated, a message from Helena. Sophia had a pain crisis. We're at the public emergency room. Don't worry, I'm with her. He closed his eyes tightly, feeling nausea rise in his throat. The envelope in his pocket seemed to burn his skin. He returned to his office, locked the door, and with trembling hands opened the envelope. Inside, besides the promised money, there was a flash drive and a sheet of paper with meticulous instructions. The scheme was more sophisticated and extensive than Marcelo had imagined. It wasn't just about the gas station chain, but an operation that involved other companies, offshore accounts, and values that made his head spin. His role would be to create a layer of legitimacy for specific transactions, using his position as administrative manager to manipulate records, create false invoices, and divert part of the money to designated accounts. The plan was so well crafted that if followed correctly, it would be practically impossible to trace. Marcelo felt a chill. This wasn't created by an amateur. It was the work of professionals. people for whom money laundering was just another day's work, and now they wanted him to join them. His phone rang, startling him. It was Helena from the hospital. "They're asking for the health insurance card, Marcelo. I explained it was cancelled, but they're saying care through the public system could take hours, and she's in a lot of pain." Her voice was choked, trying not to cry. "How much would private care cost?" he asked, looking at the open envelope on his desk. "Almost 2,000, with the tests the doctor wants to do." Marcelo closed his eyes. "Tell them we'll pay. I'm on my way." The private hospital was 20 minutes from the office. Marcelo drove like an automaton, his mind divided between worry for Sofia and the weight of the dirty money in his pocket. In the parking lot, before getting out of the car, he took 500 real notes from the envelope and put them in his wallet. The rest he hid in the glove compartment. Upon entering the hospital, the smell of antiseptic and the aseptic environment hit him as always, a reminder of how many times they had been there in recent months. He found Helena at the reception, her face marked by worry and sleepless nights. "Where is she?" he asked, briefly hugging his wife. "They've already taken her for tests. The doctor thinks it might be an inflammation in the sciatic nerve because of the injury." Helena watched him curiously when he took the money from his wallet without hesitation and paid the receptionist. "How did you?" she began to ask. "Salary advance," Marcelo replied quickly. "Rogerio understood our situation." The lie came out too easily from his lips, leaving a bitter taste. Helena smiled, relieved, and squeezed his hand. "I knew you'd find a way." The trust in her eyes was like a knife twisting in his chest. While they waited for the test results, sitting side by side in the waiting room, Marcelo couldn't stop thinking about what he had just done. He had crossed a line, not just by accepting the money, but by using it, by lying to Helena. It was just the beginning, and he already felt contaminated. His cell phone vibrated again. A message from Rogerio. "I need your answer by the end of the workday. The first operation happens tomorrow." Marcelo put the phone away without responding, feeling the noose tightening. Helena rested her head on his shoulder, exhausted. "You know what Sofia told me yesterday," she commented, breaking the silence. "That when she grows up, she wants to be like you. Honest and hard-working," were her words. Marcelo felt as if something broke inside him. The image of his daughter admiring values that he was about to completely betray was almost unbearable. "She'll be okay," he murmured, not knowing if he was trying to convince Helena or himself, and which okay he was talking about, Sofia's physical health or the moral future he was compromising. 3 hours later, they left the hospital with Sofia medicated and calmer. The diagnosis had confirmed the doctor's suspicion, an acute inflammation that, if treated properly, would leave no sequelae. "We need to maintain regular treatment," the doctor had emphasized, looking significantly at Marcelo, aware of the family's financial problems. In the car, Sofia fell asleep in the back seat, the effect of the painkillers finally providing her some relief. "I'll take you both home, and then I need to go back to the office," Marcelo said while driving. Helena looked at him, surprised. "Today? It's already past 3 in the afternoon." He nodded without taking his eyes off the road. "I have an important meeting about that advance." It wasn't exactly a lie. Helena didn't question further, lost in her own thoughts. The silence in the car was heavy, filled only by Sofia's soft breathing as she slept and by the distant roar of Marcelo's conscience, which he desperately tried to ignore. Back at the office at 4:30 p.m., Marcelo found a strangely tense atmosphere. Employees whispered in groups that dispersed when he approached. In his office, he found Carlos, the company's accountant, waiting for him. "Marcelo, we need to talk," said the man, visibly nervous. "About what?" he asked, fearing that somehow Carlos knew about Rogerio's proposal. "About irregularities I found in the company's accounts," Carlos replied, lowering his voice. "Strange movements, invoices that don't correspond to real services, money that appears and disappears without explanation." Marcelo felt his blood freeze. Carlos continued, increasingly agitated. I took this to Rogerio yesterday. Thought he didn't know that someone was diverting money from the company, but his reaction was strange. He said I was mistaken, that they were normal procedures. But they're not, Marcelo. That's money laundering, I'm sure. He paused, anxiously looking at the door. And today, I received an email firing me. No explanation, no notice. I'm being silenced. The revelation hit Marcelo like lightning. Carlos had discovered the scheme, and for trying to do the right thing, was being eliminated. It was a glimpse of what happened to those who opposed Rogerio's plans. Why are you telling me this? He asked cautiously. Carlos hesitated. Because you're the only one in a position of authority I trust. And because he lowered his voice even more. Before being blocked from the system, I made copies of everything. I have proof, Marcelo, and I don't know what to do with it. He extended a flash drive identical to the one Marcelo had received from Rogerio. It's all here. I thought about taking it to the police, but I'm afraid Rogerio has connections. Powerful people protect him. Marcelo stared at the flash drive as if it were a bomb, about to explode. In one day, he had gone from potential accomplice to potential whistleblower. The irony of the situation didn't escape him. Leave it with me, he finally said, taking the flash drive. I'll analyze all this carefully, and we'll decide the best path. Carlos seemed relieved. Thank you. I knew I could count on you. Guilt hit Marcelo like a wave. If Carlos knew that, hours before, he was considering joining the scheme that his friend was now asking him to report. After Carlos left, Marcelo locked the door and sat down, his head in his hands. The situation had become exponentially more complicated. Now he possessed evidence of a criminal scheme collected by Carlos and instructions to participate in that same scheme provided by Rogerio. He was exactly in the crossfire. He turned on the computer and inserted Carlos's flash drive. The files were meticulous: spreadsheets, transfer receipts, records of shell companies, everything documented with obsessive precision. Carlos wasn't exaggerating. It was a massive money laundering scheme, using the gas station chain as a front. And now, Rogerio wanted Marcelo to assume a central role in this operation, probably to replace someone who had become a risk. Perhaps Carlos himself, who had begun to ask too many questions. His phone rang. It was Rogerio. I need you in my office. Now. The tone admitted no refusal. Marcelo kept both flash drives in his pocket, took a deep breath, and headed to his boss's office, feeling as if he were walking to his own execution. Rogerio wasn't alone. Upon entering the room, Marcelo